The mysterious death of Buddha, his final days, last teachings, hidden truths. Imagine knowing that your final moments are approaching. Would you embrace them with serenity, or would you resist, grasping for just a little more time? For Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, this was not a mere philosophical thought experiment. At the age of 80, he embarked on his last journey, a journey not just of miles, but of wisdom, impermanence, and the ultimate letting go. Yet, his final days remained shrouded in mystery. Did he foresee the exact moment of his passing? Was his last meal simply a case of food poisoning, or was there a deeper karmic design at play? And most importantly, what were his final words, and how do they hold the key to true liberation? In today's video on Zen Buddhism wisdom, we will retrace the Buddha's final footsteps, uncover the profound lessons hidden within his last teachings, and explore the ultimate truth that his passing revealed. Stay with us until the end, because this story is not just about the Buddha, it's about all of us. The final journey, Buddha's last walk on earth. The Buddha's final journey was not merely a physical passage from one place to another, it was a pilgrimage of wisdom, a deliberate unfolding of the deepest truths he had spent a lifetime teaching. He did not seek comfort, nor did he resist the inevitable. Instead, he embraced it with the quiet dignity of one who had long since transcended the fears that bind ordinary beings to the cycle of birth and death. His journey began in Rajagaha, modern-day Rajgir, India, a city that had once echoed with the voices of kings and sages. He had walked these streets before, sharing the Dharma with monarchs and mendicants alike. But now, at 80 years old, his body had grown frail. His disciples, seeing his exhaustion, begged him to rest. Yet, with unwavering resolve, he chose to press forward, setting his sights on Kushinagar, more than 200 miles away. Why did he insist on undertaking such a difficult journey, knowing full well that it would be his last? Some say he was following an ancient karmic thread, returning to the place where a past life had ended in meditation beneath the very same sal trees. Others believe he was teaching his followers, one final time, the profound lesson of impermanence, not through words alone, but through the very act of his passing. But there was something deeper at play. The roads the Buddha walked had seen many travelers before him, merchants carrying silk and spices, scholars seeking truth, soldiers marching to war. But as he moved along the dusty paths, his every step carried a different weight. It was not just his frail body that made the journey arduous, it was the silent awareness that he was walking toward his own dissolution. Yet, he did not falter. At every village he passed, he continued to teach. His voice, though soft, still carried the force of truth. In Nalanda, where great philosophers once gathered, he reminded his followers, decay is inherent in all conditioned things. Work out your own salvation with diligence. He was preparing them, slowly but surely, for the moment when he would no longer be there to guide them. He wanted them to understand, truly understand, that the path to enlightenment was not dependent on his physical presence. The Dharma, like a flame passed from one candle to another, would continue to burn long after he was gone. Yet even as he spoke these words, his disciples struggled to accept them. To them, he was not just a teacher, he was the embodiment of wisdom itself. How could they imagine a world without him? As the Buddha and his companions approached Vaishali, the city where he had once been honored with golden bowls and celestial processions, something remarkable happened. The night before his departure, he stood quietly by the banks of the Ganges, gazing at the moon's reflection in the rippling water. A great stillness fell over the land, as if nature itself had paused to listen. At dawn, as he prepared to leave, a strange phenomenon occurred. The trees that lined the road, trees that should have been bare in that season, suddenly burst into bloom, their petals falling like silent tears upon the path ahead. The people of Vaishali, sensing that this would be the last time they saw him, gathered in sorrow, offering garlands and incense. A woman stepped forward, her hands trembling, and asked, "Lord, will you ever return to Vaishali?" The Buddha gazed upon the city, his face serene, and uttered his final farewell, this is the last time I shall behold this place." With those words, he turned and walked away. The air grew heavy with grief, but he did not look back. As the journey continued, other strange occurrences were said to have taken place. In Pava, as the Buddha rested beneath a grove of sal trees, a gentle rain fell from a cloudless sky. The monks, startled, whispered among themselves. Some believed the devas were paying their final respects. Others thought it was the very earth weeping for the passing of one who had understood its deepest mysteries. Even the rivers seemed to recognize the significance of the moment. When the Buddha reached the banks of the Hiranyavati river, the water, usually swift and restless, was said to have stilled completely, reflecting the sky like a mirror. Yet, for all these signs and wonders, the Buddha himself remained unmoved. These were but fleeting echoes of an impermanent world, a world he had long since ceased to cling to. On the night before his final rest, the Buddha did something unexpected. As his disciples settled in for the evening, he quietly rose and walked alone beneath the starlit sky. The earth was cool beneath his feet, the scent of jasmine lingering in the air. He moved slowly, not out of weariness, but with the quiet reverence of one who knew he was taking his last steps in this world. What thoughts passed through his mind in that moment? Perhaps he reflected on the path he had walked, not just the miles between Rajagaha and Kushinagar, but the greater journey of his life. From the palace of his youth, where he had once lived in ignorance of suffering, to the Bodhi tree under which he had awakened to the deepest truths of existence. Perhaps he thought of the countless seekers he had guided, the kings and beggars alike who had knelt before him, hoping to grasp even a fraction of the wisdom he carried. Or perhaps he thought of nothing at all, only the quiet rhythm of his breath, the rise and fall of all things, the great turning of the wheel of samsara. And then, as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, he returned to his disciples, his face as peaceful as the morning sky. The final destination awaited. The mysterious last meal, poison or fate. The meal at Pava was no ordinary supper, it was a moment suspended between history and legend, between fate and human intention. After days of arduous travel, through dust-laden roads and under the weight of his own failing body, the Buddha arrived at the home of Kunda, a humble yet devoted metalworker. Kunda, eager to offer what little he had to the awakened one, prepared a dish known as Sukaramadava. But what, exactly, was this final meal? For centuries, scholars and practitioners alike have debated its nature. Some insist that Sukaramadava referred to tender pork, a delicacy in those times, while others argue that it was a rare variety of mushroom, perhaps one harvested unknowingly from a toxic source. But then, there is the darker question, was it poisoned? Did the Buddha's last meal contain more than simple nourishment? Shortly after eating, the Buddha fell gravely ill. The pain struck swiftly, spreading through his body like ripples in a pond. His disciples watched in horror as their beloved teacher, whose wisdom had remained unshaken through decades of hardship, was now brought to his knees by an unseen force. Severe stomach pain, debilitating dysentery, symptoms that could point to natural food poisoning or something far more sinister, but what happened next defied expectation. Instead of expressing regret, instead of condemning or even questioning the meal that had weakened him, the Buddha turned to Kunda with profound kindness. His voice, though frail, carried the same unwavering clarity it always had. "Do not be troubled, Kunda. The offering of a Buddha's last meal brings great merit." These words have puzzled historians and spiritual seekers for centuries. Why would he say this? Was he simply comforting Kunda, ensuring that the man did not drown in guilt for unintentionally harming him? Or did he glimpse something deeper, a karmic thread that wove his final meal into the grand tapestry of existence? Some scholars dismiss the poisoning theory entirely, arguing that the Buddha's symptoms were consistent with acute dysentery, likely caused by spoiled food or contaminated water. After all, in those days, sanitation was crude, and even the most careful meal could be tainted. Others, however, suggest that the meal was no accident, that unseen hands had intervened to hasten the Buddha's departure from this world, but what if the real mystery is not in the meal itself, but in the way the Buddha met his fate? There is a lesson hidden here, subtle yet profound. Unlike ordinary men, who resist death, who rage against the failing of the body, the Buddha did not resist. He did not curse his sickness, nor did he seek a remedy. Instead, he accepted it as he had accepted all things, with serene equanimity. Perhaps, in that moment, he was offering his disciples one last, unspoken teaching. That even the body of an enlightened one is subject to decay. That even the greatest wisdom does not shield one from suffering. And that death, feared by so many, is neither punishment nor tragedy, it is simply the next step on the path. If there was poison in that meal, it was powerless before him. If fate had conspired to take him that night, he met it with a knowing smile. The Buddha had always taught that nothing arises without cause. And in that moment, as his body grew weaker and the sands of his final days began to slip away, he was not a victim. He was simply walking forward, one last time, into the great unknown. The last words, Buddha's final teaching on letting go. As the Buddha's body grew weaker, his spirit remained unshaken. Even in the face of death, he did not waver, did not seek comfort, nor did he retreat into silence. Instead, he transformed his final moments into a teaching, one last lesson on impermanence, on letting go, on the nature of all things. The journey to Kushinagar had been long and arduous, his frail body bearing the weight of years spent walking the path of wisdom. Upon arriving, he requested that a resting place be prepared between two great sal trees. And then, something miraculous occurred. Though it was not their season to bloom, the trees suddenly burst into a cascade of delicate white flowers, their petals falling gently like celestial offerings upon the Buddha's still form. In this sacred moment, surrounded by his most devoted disciples, there was one who could not contain his sorrow, Ananda, the Buddha's closest attendant, the one who had served him tirelessly, who had memorized his teachings, who had walked beside him for so many years. Now, faced with the imminent departure of his beloved teacher, Ananda's heart trembled. He had witnessed the Buddha calm storms, silence kings, and illuminate the minds of thousands. He had seen wisdom so vast that it could part the veil of illusion itself. And yet, for all his understanding, he could not stop the grief that surged within him. The Buddha, sensing Ananda's pain, turned his gaze upon him, soft, knowing, infinite in compassion. And then, with a voice that carried both the weight of eternity and the lightness of the wind, he spoke, "Do not grieve, Ananda. All things must pass. Strive on with diligence." In these final words lay the essence of his entire teaching. Nothing in this world, no bond, no love, no wisdom, no body, can escape impermanence. To hold on is to suffer. To let go is to be free. Perhaps the Buddha saw in Ananda's sorrow a reflection of every human heart, the desperate clinging to what is fleeting, the refusal to accept the changing tides of existence. And so, even in his last breath, he sought to guide not only his disciple but all of humanity toward the one truth that could liberate them. As midnight drew near, the world seemed to still. The heavens, it is said, trembled. Flowers continued to fall. And then, like a flame extinguishing itself without regret, the Buddha exhaled for the last time. In that instant, he entered Parinirvana, the final, absolute release from the cycle of birth and death. No more returning, no more suffering, no more grasping. Only vast, boundless liberation. The lesson was complete. The journey was over, and yet, in the silence that followed, in the grief that would soon transform into reverence, the Buddha's final words continue to echo, an eternal whisper to all those who still wander the path: strive on with diligence. The legacy of the last moments, lessons for us today. The passing of the Buddha was not a tragic loss but the ultimate fulfillment of his teachings. It was as if his entire life had been leading to this final moment, a moment that would crystallize the essence of his wisdom in the most profound way. Death, the great mystery that humankind has feared and resisted for millennia, was something he embraced with serenity. In doing so, He left behind not just words but a living example of how to meet the inevitable, with grace, clarity, and absolute freedom. His last words were not meant to console, they were meant to awaken. All things must pass. Strive on with diligence. In just a few simple sentences, he revealed 3 timeless truths, truths that, if understood deeply, have the power to transform how we live and how we die. The first is that impermanence is the only constant. The universe is in a constant state of flux. The seasons change, mountains erode, rivers shift their course, and civilizations rise and fall. No empire has ever stood forever, no human body has remained unchanging, and no moment, no matter how joyful or painful, can last indefinitely. The Buddha's life itself was proof of this. From a prince surrounded by luxury to a wandering ascetic, from a great teacher to a dying man beneath the sal trees, his journey was a testament to the transient nature of existence. But instead of fearing impermanence, he taught us to embrace it. When we resist change, we suffer. When we accept it, we find peace. Imagine how much suffering we create by holding on, clinging to youth, possessions, relationships, or even our own identities. The Buddha's passing was his final demonstration of this truth. Even the greatest of beings must one day let go. The second truth is that non-attachment is true freedom. From birth, we are conditioned to attach, to people, to ideas, to the illusion of permanence. We believe that if we hold on tightly enough, we can stop time, prevent loss, and protect ourselves from suffering. But the very act of grasping creates suffering. Think of the kings and emperors throughout history who clung desperately to power, fearing the inevitable decay of their reigns. Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China, sought an elixir of immortality, consuming mercury in a futile attempt to escape death, only to hasten his own demise. In contrast, the Buddha did not seek to escape death, nor did he fight against it. He let go completely, and in doing so, he achieved the ultimate freedom, Parinirvana. True liberation is not about acquiring more, achieving more, or securing permanence in a fleeting world. It is about surrendering the illusion of control. It is about walking through life with open hands rather than clenched fists. It is about realizing that everything we think we own was never truly ours to begin with. The third truth is that awakening requires effort. Many people assume that enlightenment is something that happens suddenly, a gift bestowed upon the fortunate few. But the Buddha's final instruction was clear: strive on with diligence. He did not promise an effortless path. He did not offer a shortcut. He reminded us that the journey to awakening is one that requires discipline, perseverance, and unwavering commitment. Throughout history, those who have attained wisdom, mastery, or spiritual realization have done so through immense dedication. Leonardo da Vinci filled thousands of pages with sketches and notes, relentlessly pursuing knowledge. The samurai of feudal Japan spent their lives in rigorous training, embodying the Bushido code. The great sages of every tradition did not simply stumble upon enlightenment, they cultivated it, step by step, breath by breath. So too must we. In an era where distractions are endless and patience is scarce, the Buddha's last teaching is more relevant than ever. If we seek true understanding, true peace, true liberation, we must walk the path with diligence. We must meditate, reflect, and apply wisdom in every moment. The path is not always easy, but it is always worth walking. Even now, more than 2,500 years later, the Buddha's last words continue to guide countless seekers. His presence may no longer be physical, but his wisdom is more alive than ever. Carried through scriptures, through teachers, through those who strive to live with mindfulness and compassion. His passing was not the end. It was the continuation of his greatest teaching. And for those who listen, his voice still whispers through the silence: everything changes. Let go. Walk the path. And strive on with diligence. Imagine standing at the edge of existence, knowing that everything you have ever known, your body, your thoughts, your very sense of self, is about to dissolve. Would you resist, or would you let go with complete peace? Buddha did not just teach impermanence, he lived it, even in his final breath. His passing was not a moment of sorrow but the ultimate lesson in liberation, a reminder that nothing lasts forever and that true freedom lies in embracing this truth. Now, the real question is, how will you apply this wisdom to your own life? Will you cling to the illusion of permanence, or will you begin to let go, to live with greater awareness, presence, and acceptance? Let us know in the comments, what is the most profound lesson you take from the Buddha's final moments? If this journey through his last teachings has resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Zen Buddhism Wisdom. Together, let's continue exploring the timeless truths that can transform our lives, because in the end, true wisdom is not in simply knowing, it is in living.